Welcome back, everybody. Santa Fe Fashion Week, Fashion Behind the Curtain podcast. I'm Stephen Cuomo, executive producer of Santa Fe Fashion Week. I'm really excited to have Alyssa on the line. Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my first introduction to fashion was really kind of creating something of my own in order to get somewhat of an experience. So I started a personal fashion blog and from there was able to use that as a portfolio to write for my school's fashion magazine. And by promoting my work at the fashion magazine, my online articles were seen by a professional at a luxury fashion brand in Minneapolis. And I was able to land my first corporate internship through there. That was my first foot in the door experience in a corporate setting. And I was able to use that to really land a lot of freelance fashion brand jobs.
That's interesting that these internships or posting blogs and stuff like that. Oftentimes,
Mhm.
you could catch people's eyes. So I think that's a really cool way to get into it.
Definitely, I would recommend that to anybody who's just getting started because I think it can be really difficult to get that first foot in the door experience without having any sort of background. So, either making a portfolio of your own or even attending fashion events and networking events is a really great way to get started. After my first internship, I was able to kind of really run with it. I started with marketing and had moved to Atlanta after graduating from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And I had reached out to a fashion agency to see if I could work for them. And although I didn't end up working for them, it was perfect because I found a mentor in the CEO. And she had a couple clients that needed somebody to help with merchandising and production and warehouse management. And so I kind of perfectly fit in those roles and found myself experimenting with different things than marketing and fashion. And I did skip over a little bit. I realized I also have a modeling background as well. So quite diverse.
Very diverse. So it almost sounds like
Mhm.
from like A to Z, from being in front of the camera, behind the counter, logistics, and everything like that. So kind of
Yeah.
walk us through that because a lot of the people that listen to my podcast, they're emerging designers. Some of them are a little more established. The brands you're working for, it sounds like they were already doing manufacturing and logistics and stuff like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about those brands?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with luxury, men's and women's. And it moved to when I went to Atlanta, it was a sports market for both companies, actually. One that I'm currently still with is a football company that trains youth quarterbacks to NFL quarterbacks. There's actually a documentary as well, if anyone listening is curious. It's called The Quincy Avery Effect on Hulu. And it shares his story along with a lot of NFL players and how they got started. And I'm really inspired by the entrepreneurs that I'm working with now and just the way that they kind of earn their titles in respect to their businesses.
Kind of pivot. So you were doing luxury brands before that. Is that correct?
Yes, luxury. It started in my first internship was with a men's luxury company in Minneapolis. It's called Hammermaid,
Okay.
and I was doing marketing for them originally.
When you say marketing, because again, I think a lot of fashion brands could use some help when it comes to marketing. Were you doing their social media campaigns, or can you tell us a little bit about the marketing you were
Yeah.
doing for them?
Oh, absolutely. It started a lot with social media marketing, and in today my work is definitely not as much of social media marketing. I kind of moved away from that, but that was how I got my start for sure. Was social media campaigns and photo shoot assistants and like commercial assistants as well, or helping them navigate their campaigns.
Can you maybe dig a little deeper into that? A lot of designers, they don't have the budget to go out and hire marketing people and photography and stuff like that. So, can you tell us about the marketing campaigns? Were they more like brand stories? Like, what angle were they kind of using to reach their consumer?
This is wow, I have to think way back. This was 2021. So a lot of it was they use models. So this is a luxury brand. By the time I worked for them, they were already 13 or 15 years running. So they had their specific models already set that they'd been using for a few years. And they would do 30-second commercials, that type of thing. And a lot of their marketing really was just the modeling images. A lot of fashion brands are still kind of doing that today as well. Yeah, it really was mostly just product based marketing.
So let's go up to like current times. It's because we talked on the phone, but then I've been seeing a lot more of your stuff pop up on my social media. So you're doing also like fashion news stories.
Yes, that's new. So you had found me. I had started it about a month ago. and I'm really glad we connected over it as well. Um, I'm just building kind of a Substack platform, really, is how the articles are coming out now. So weekly, I'll write about 5 articles a week and post content like job boards, what's happening in fashion, companies and entrepreneurs that are making an impact, and kind of similar to what you're doing with the behind the career, how do you get started, or what kind of work are people in merchandising versus production versus marketing doing? Kind of just looking at it from a lens of working in the industry.
Yeah, so many different things you could do in the fashion industry. I think a lot of people think
Mhm.
the marketing or being a
Yep,
designer, being a model, but there's so much more that goes into it.
there
So
really
that
are.
leads us up to this new venture. You have a magazine you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of just posting on Instagram, TikTok weekly, and Substack, I'll also be I'm working on it this summer to be launched by August, which is a physical print.
Hmm.
I've lived in 4 states now, so I've gotten to know many, many fashion creatives, fashion photographers, models, stylists, makeup artists, and I just kind of want to include them and promote their work. So instead of building my own shoots, just because I'm at a point where I don't necessarily have the budget to make my own production of everything, I'm just kind of finding work that I find inspiring from photographers that I may know, may not know, and asking if I can promote their work, tell their story a little bit, along with just other fashion articles within the magazine. And I'm also working with New York City, some people I've met in New York thus far. They host fashion networking events once a month. So I kind of asked if by end of summer, if I could bring my magazine and co-host with them and maybe give out the magazines for free, just kind of as a little gift to get people excited about the industry while they're there.
That's brilliant. So I think networking is so important. So can you tell us what, for those of us that aren't able to attend such an event in New York, can you tell us what that event looks like, what kind of people attend, how many people, and maybe some of the successes you've had from attending such an event?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've attended events in Minneapolis, Atlanta, and now New York. New York is definitely a different scene for sure, but I think it's possible to find fashion events anywhere. Fashion Week is in almost every city as well, so I think that's a great way to get involved. But in New York specifically, this week was just New York Tech Week. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but I met a lot of fashion professionals, either founders, investors, brand owners, a lot of tech professionals as well, because it was Tech Week. It was very focused on that industry. However, fashion tech itself is booming as an industry. So I found the conversations to be incredible on that aspect. There's probably, depending on which ones you go to, a lot of them are free, around 50 to the event I attended yesterday was 700 people. So
Wow.
they can get really big.
Yeah, when you have 700 people there, it's hard to, like, I don't know if target's the right
Talk
word,
to
but it's hard.
everybody. Right.
Well, target, yeah, talk to, there's a lot of interesting people to talk to. So let's dive into like fashion tech a little bit because I see that a little bit on LinkedIn and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
technology now where like body scanning and things like that.
Mhm.
Is that the kind of tech you were talking to, or what kind of like fashion slash tech people were you kind of meeting?
Definitely. A lot of people involved with AI companies, a lot of startup AI founders that I met this weekend. And it's not just AI, it really does, virtual try-ons are becoming a really big thing. I know Google and Amazon have been working for years to perfect that, and I just found an app called Doji that just launched in March where you can try on luxury clothing. I think that's changing the game in terms of how we shop for fashion, and I'd love to learn more. I wanted to ask and pick their brains a little bit on, is it coding? Is it only AI? Is it, there's just so much happening, especially in terms of pop-ups for fashion brands. You know how luxury brands are doing a lot more with augmented reality or virtual reality, or just making more tech-driven decoration choices as well, even, at their events to kind of promote where the industry is going right now.
That's it. I interviewed a woman. She writes for Vogue Italia. She's a contributor, and she was talking about. We were talking about like pop up, pop up
Mhm.
boutiques, and And
Mhm.
fashion and art, you're seeing a lot more like my Santa Fe Fashion Week is coming up in October, where it's going to be held at an art gallery. And then you see a lot of like artists and fashion designers teaming up and using maybe their art to inspire their fashion and stuff like that. Are you seeing that around New York a bit?
Definitely. I'm trying to think of a recent pop-up. There was a collaboration between Bratz and Gentle Monster. Gentle Monster makes glasses. I think there was a pop-up in Los Angeles last week, and they had kind of like a bunch of giant sculptures of Bratz dolls wearing, the glasses they designed, and they had things kind of moving. So it was all very interactive. And they had an AI booth that turned you into a Bratz doll. So I think they're getting a little bit more creative in that space with what they can do to keep people interacting and
Yeah, I think
engaging.
like yeah, that's what we're doing with Cafe Fashion. I think like a more immersive event, and it's interesting because
Mhm.
I just did a podcast earlier
Yeah.
today, and we are talking about again pop up boutiques. I helped my friend out with this energy drink, Beyond Energy, and I think like any retail product, be it fashion or an energy drink and stuff like that. We were talking about how with the energy drink, we don't necessarily do pop up boutiques, but we'll do like demos. So we'll set up at a grocery store or a convenience store that we're already selling, and then get people to try the drink. And as we were talking, kind of dawned on me, same thing with fashion. She makes women's bras and panties. And she was talking about how, everybody's still very textile. They want to try on that fashion. And although a
Mhm.
lot of her stuff right now is through a community, she built up this really great community and then selling directly to the consumer. But again, some people want to try, touch the fabric, and how pop-ups could be so great because you don't have to spend the money of having a retail store anywhere. And some boutiques
Mhm.
aren't ready to take a chance on your brand, but to maybe go to different cities. And I also kind of compared to like indie bands, where indie bands go on tour. And I think
Mhm.
fashion designers may want to embrace the same thing, doing pop-ups.
Right, exactly. And you want to make those immersive. Like you said, they can touch and feel the clothing. They can ask questions, maybe where it's made, how the quality is, that sort of thing. So events are definitely one of my favorite things to be a part of and keep working on. And just to go back further, even into the tech, how they can keep making it better and better. There's, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Thea Co. They just released, I think, a couple months ago, but they're a secondhand retail platform that's using AI to tell the customer what the best price for a specific product is. So it's an AI tool that's a plugin. So if I'm on my laptop, it'll pop up and say, is this a good purchase? Yes or no. And here's where I can buy it for cheaper. And it lists all of the websites that it's available on in order of price lowest to highest. And I just find it really genius because they're using an affiliate marketing program or as well, like business model in terms of how they're earning commission for their profit. And they're both 22. It's Sophia Kiani and Phoebe Gates, Bill Gates' daughter. So I've been
Oh
watching
yeah, I read
theirs
about that. Yeah,
a
I read
lot.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been following them a lot because I personally would love to get more involved with fashion tech, but I am not a coder. I think my extent has been e-commerce, and that's as far as it's gone. But I would love to learn more because I find it very fascinating. And AI, I think, can be really great in terms of how we're making, secondhand bigger with how it's more accessible and easy to use in terms of shopping for fashion. There's also a point where I look at it and it's kind of taking models out of the equation and photographers in terms of marketing. If you're using an AI model, what does that mean for models and photographers, in their jobs? Or, how do people feel about it? I just am curious.
No, I think it's interesting. I've been
Yeah.
around long enough. I always say that there's really no new ideas. It's just technology changes things. You go back to Uber. It's basically a cab company, and so now you have
Mhm.
technology that can bring people together. And I was a stockbroker for a long time, so I always follow investments and stuff like that. But when he was raising capital and pushing the company out, his pitch was like it's going to take over. Like nobody's going to own cars anymore. And of course, if you're in New
Mhm.
York, it's definitely a benefit, or it's nice to be able to call an Uber. But again, most people still drive their own cars or
Right.
Airbnbs. It's a way to book rooms. I mean, the list goes on and on. They talked about how Amazon was going to replace brick and mortar, but brick and mortar is still around. So I think
Mhm.
AI obviously will put a dent in things, but like anything else, it may be 10 or 15% of the overall market.
Mhm.
Going back to the magazine. So do you see, and
Yeah,
I know how things could always evolve, obviously. So
yeah.
do you see it more of storytelling for the people in the industry that, or what do you see the structure of your magazine?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm making it more targeted towards people who are either fashion creatives, if they're a model, photographer, stylist, hair or makeup artist, or a fashion professional in terms of corporate work like merchandising, production, marketing. The list goes on. There are so many different roles in the fashion industry. And I see other accounts doing it. I'm honestly just joining the conversation a little bit, is how I see it. I'm not doing it for profit or anything. It's just more of a passion project and a way for me to connect with people in New York, especially at these fashion networking events. It's a great conversation starter with founders and things as well.
Oh, definitely. Like, have you thought about
Mhm.
doing any podcast? Have you thought about hosting a podcast? Have you done anything like that? Or
Potentially, right now I'm just working kind of multiple gigs and with different fashion brands, and I feel my brain is also split.
Mhm.
But, a podcast is something I'd definitely be curious about starting one day, especially after listening to yours. I really, really enjoy that aspect of really learning what it takes to do different roles in fashion because I haven't experienced everything. Just,
Well,
it's good to learn.
it's a lot to learn, and I it's
Mhm.
almost after I was reading your news stories, because I was doing that for a minute. I was doing, like, fashion news in a minute. I mean, there's a lot of people, I mean, everybody's doing the same thing, on TikTok and stuff like that, but I think, like, podcasts, you could add your own, thoughts on and stuff like that. But I thought it might be interesting to maybe have you on as a guest once a month to talk about what's going on in fashion and, and just getting that perspective, or even maybe occasionally having you as a co-host. So put that
Yeah.
put that in your mind. But down the road, you may want to do your own podcast because again, you become a thought leader, get to talk about fashion and talk about fashion tech. I don't know if this qualifies for that, but I joined a
Mhm.
group, and I may have mentioned this to you before, but it's called Pod Match, which is
Mhm.
kind of like a matchmaking service for people that are either a guest or a host or want to do both. And the challenge, although it's a good platform, there's not many people in that in the fashion space there. So my son
Right.
he's a software engineer, and so we're launching. It's still in the beta program, but
Mhm.
Fashion Podcast Connect. Same thing, like what you're doing. It's just a great way for people to reach out. Being an ex stockbroker, I have no problem like doing cold outreaches on LinkedIn or TikTok and stuff like that. But I know a
Mhm.
lot of people are uncomfortable with that. So to be able to just be able to connect
Right.
and make things like that happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something I would definitely be interested in. I think right now I'd be a little nervous about my commitment to a podcast right now if it wasn't, if I'm building it from scratch on my own. Because I
Right.
think the magazine, I'm already, really putting in the work just to put information out online and just for passion. But yeah, co-hosting would be amazing just to even get started. This is my first podcast experience, so it's
Well, you're
really
doing great.
exciting. It
Yeah.
is.
No, and I think I think obviously, paper and digital magazines still have a place
Mhm.
to live. But again,
Absolutely.
and I always look at it like this way where, TikTok, it's very, very fast twitch, people look through it and they go through it really fast. And
Right.
so that's their expectations. YouTube, I think you're seeing a lot more like fashion documentaries. I always talk about like Anthony
Mhm.
Bourdain with food, food and culture, but I think there's a place for fashion and culture. And then LinkedIn, I like LinkedIn fashion groups because it's a great way to connect. But doing these
Yeah.
like business podcasts, the Business of Fashion podcast, and then with your
Mhm.
insight and understanding business, it's really a great way. Not that I'm pushing this on you to do your own podcast, but if you're having those conversations anyway, and now all of a sudden
Mhm.
you're in New York, you're like, oh, I'd love to have you on as a guest. And it's a
Yeah.
20 or 30-minute conversation, but it allows people in the industry just to go a little bit deeper. And sometimes people don't have time to maybe read a magazine, but they're driving through the city or whatever, and they can listen
Mhm.
to the podcast. So I don't know. I'm just a huge believer in
Yeah,
podcasts.
absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to share anything I'm doing. And, I'm still so new to the city, but I'm meeting more and more people. And here's an example. I think New York is kind of a place where you really just have to show up and just be yourself and talk to the person next to you because you'll find in the most unexpected moments that you might meet someone that is very much in alignment with what you are currently doing. I This is just the example I had on Friday night when I went to a fashion mixer for Tech Week and I was in the women's bathroom and I might have met my next modeling agency that I might sign with. She owns Manhattan agency
Mhm.
and we kind of just bonded over the shoes I was wearing and started talking and she also has a fashion brand, and I let her know, hey, I freelance for fashion brands. I do this, this, and this. I might either model for her swimwear brand or sign with her agency, and just I'm connecting with her again on Wednesday. It was just kind of something that just falls into place. It was a very comfortable conversation. And again, unexpected place. You wouldn't you never know what might happen at those kinds of events.
You're
So
absolutely right. It's interesting again being, the next stockbroker. I mean, I think like business people, be it realtors or mortgage brokers, people
Mhm.
like that, they're used to networking, in-person networking. I mean, that's how we do a lot of our
Right,
business. But it's good to see that, that creatives are embracing that too, and also getting out and meeting people in person rather than, something. I'll go to a networking event and people are there, but they're still looking at their phone. I'm like, you have 700 people in front of you. So it's no, it's
right,
good to see that the industry people are getting out and they understand the power of networking. And I think a lot of
absolutely.
times lose faith in it. I know when I was in my 20s and I was a little more aggressive and I go to these networking events, and if I didn't
Mhm.
feel like there was a connection right away for business, I just move on real fast.
Right, and
I was living in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is almost as fast paced as New York. But these things take
mhm,
time,
it
these
does. It
relationships take
takes
time.
time. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, that's the thing, this wasn't my first rodeo with fashion networking, but that's how I made my friends in Atlanta. I would just keep going to events and you start seeing the same faces and you're like, "You know what? I think we're kind of destined to be friends or business partners or work in some capacity together." And that's how it feels with New York. I'm starting to meet more people, see the same people showing up to these events. From there, it's just you get invited to the next one and the next one. It's just a spiral, but there's so many events. So like you said, if you're not connecting with the people or the environment and it's really not for you, there's so many other ones you can attend.
Right,
So
and I would
it
think
just
out of 700 people, you'd find at least your tribe, you'd find your 20 or 30 people that are like, "Oh, yeah, we can all get along and build out our businesses." Well, again, I
right.
wanna thank you for being a guest, and we'll talk offline about, possibly bringing you on at least once a week or something like that. I know you have a lot going on. And
Mhm.
then if you run into people, which sounds like you're gonna run into a lot of people, and they'd like to be on my podcast, I love to connect with them.
Absolutely. Yes, I will definitely promote your podcast. I will absolutely at the next one. I'm going on Wednesday. So,
Fantastic, and I'll do the same for yours, I'll share your stuff, so thanks
oh,
again.
yeah, thank you so much.